Just when it seemed wild animals might spare the smallest among us, the coyote proved otherwise. From isolated encounters to a string of alarming attacks on children, here are stories of how this cunning predator crept into city limits and became a source of fear for families and a threat to childhood innocence. On Thanksgiving Day in northern Colorado Springs, the Evans family gathered in their home east of Monument Creek. Inside, the smell of roasted turkey filled the air. 4-year-old Lily Evans wore a purple jacket, her mittened hands in her father's as they stepped into the backyard. Lily loved animals. That morning, she had introduced her stuffed bear to each guest at the table. Her cousin, 6-year-old Max, shared her curiosity. By late afternoon, the two wandered past the fence, following a narrower path into a grove of trees near the neighborhood's edge. There, crouched behind a pine, was what looked like a dog. It didn't run. It watched them, ears low, eyes fixed. To children used to friendly pets, the thin frame and scruffy tail didn't raise alarm. It stirred interest. They moved closer, thinking it was a dog. What they thought was just a stray dog turned out to be a coyote, and it attacked in the blink of an eye. In a flurry of movement too fast for her to comprehend, Lily was knocked to the ground, teeth clamped into the back of her head. A scream tore through the brittle air. Her father, Mark Evans, heard it from the patio. One glance at the empty yard, and he was running. He would never forget what he saw. The gray-brown form over his daughter, her tiny limbs flailing, her cries muffled under the wild thing's growl. Without hesitation, he charged. The coyote lifted its head, startled, and met the eyes of a furious man bearing down. Mark roared, throwing his arms wide and kicking out. The animal released Lily and bounded into the brush, gone as quickly as it had come. Mark scooped his daughter up, her jacket bloodied, her sobs hiccuping against his shoulder. He didn't stop running until they reached the car. That night, as families across the country finished their desserts and drifted towards sleep, Lily lay in a hospital bed with a bandage wrapped around her scalp. The attack had left deep puncture wounds, but no lasting damage. The doctor said she was lucky. The following morning, the report reached Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Within hours, officers were combing the neighborhood, knocking on doors, interviewing residents. They knew what a coyote attack meant, not just for one family, but for the entire region. A wild animal that harms a human has crossed a dangerous line. CPW officials began a targeted operation. Any coyote seen lingering near the attack site would be removed. 2 were eventually captured over the following weeks. One, in particular, was observed returning several times to the same grove of trees. It was lean and alert, not starving, but used to something. A search of the carcass revealed human DNA between its toes and in its stomach, discarded bread crusts, hamburger remnants, and scraps wrapped in napkins. Someone had been feeding it. The revelation infuriated investigators. In wilderness education, there's a simple rule: keep wildlife wild. The moment a wild animal begins to associate humans with food, its natural fear dissolves. What remains is boldness, a dangerous confidence that can lead straight to tragedy. The coyote tested negative for rabies, but the damage had already been done. A 4-year-old girl had been attacked in daylight, within reach of her home. CPW redoubled efforts to educate the community. Flyers appeared on every doorstep. Community meetings were held in school gyms and town halls. Officers spoke with urgency and care, warning parents to never let children approach wildlife, no matter how tame it might appear. They taught hazing techniques, yelling, clapping, throwing small rocks, to reinstill the fear that keeps wild animals at bay. Still, questions lingered. Who had fed the coyote? Why? Perhaps someone believed they were helping. Perhaps the creature's sleek form and cautious steps had triggered a sense of pity. It wouldn't be the first time compassion turned to recklessness, but no one came forward. The investigation into the source of the feeding continued quietly, behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Lily returned home. Her wounds healed faster than the fear in her eyes. For weeks, she refused to go outside alone. Her father stayed close, haunted by what could have been. He found himself watching the woods each morning, searching for movement, imagining fangs behind every shadow. Time moved on, as it always does. But sometimes things can take a turn for the worse. as the neighborhood of Bellevue soon discovered. In early March 2025, Bellevue, Washington faced an unsettling situation. It began in Norwood Village, a neighborhood of closely spaced homes behind hedges and fences. On March 6th, just after 5 a.m., Marlene Crawford stepped onto her back patio with coffee. The sky was still dark, and the lawn was frosted. She sat in her chair, wrapped in a robe, waiting for the day to start. She didn't hear the approach. Only when something brushed her ankle did she turn, startled. Then, pain, sharp and burning. A coyote lunged, teeth catching her robe, pulling her halfway from the chair. She screamed, stumbled back, and slammed the sliding door shut as the coyote snapped at the glass. Inside, she bled in stunned silence while the animal vanished into the shadows. The next morning in Factoria, a man returned from a walk to find a coyote already in his garage, its head low, body stiff. Before he could react, it lunged and bit his leg. The pain was immediate, the shock worse. The animal bolted as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a streak of blood and a new level of fear. Then came the schools. On March 7th near Thai Middle School, a student waiting for a ride placed her backpack on the sidewalk, only to watch in disbelief as a coyote dashed from the brush, snatched it up, and vanished. It was broad daylight. No one was hurt, but something about the image, a wild animal stealing a child's backpack like a predator in disguise, spread quickly among parents. Unease turned into worry. 4 days later, the worry became terror. It was March 11th, a cold, clear morning. A group of children stood at a bus stop in Factoria, talking in sleepy tones, backpacks at their feet. The coyote came from behind a parked car. It moved fast, too fast. It lunged at the children, teeth snapping, paws scraping the pavement. Screams echoed. One child's coat tore at the shoulder. Another's backpack was yanked and dragged a few feet before an adult charged, flailing their arms and yelling. The coyote hesitated, then retreated into the trees. That evening the same, or another coyote struck again. In a dimly lit street near the previous attack, a child walking with their parents was bitten on the hand. The bite wasn't deep, but it was enough. Hospital lights, stitches, and questions followed. Wildlife officers arrived quickly, tracking prints through the muddy grass and soft lawns. One animal was found, cornered, and dispatched near the site of the attack, but they weren't sure it was the only one. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife responded with urgency. Patrols increased. Federal animal control experts joined the effort. Officers moved through neighborhoods in pairs, knocking on doors, handing out leaflets. Signs were posted near schools and parks. Residents who once watched birds in their backyards now watched shadows instead. South Bellevue was still on edge 3 days later when the second coyote was found. It had returned to the edge of a park, nosing through garbage bins and pacing along the fence of a daycare playground. Officers moved in quietly. One shot rang out. In the days that followed, as news of the euthanized coyotes spread, so too did the questions. How had it come to this? WDFW officers traced a pattern in the attacks. The same times, the same locations, the same behavior. These coyotes were not merely bold, they were habituated. Somewhere, someone had fed them. Maybe it had started as scraps tossed from a back porch. Maybe an open compost bin, dog food left out. A hand stretched out in kindness without thought to consequence. Whatever the source, the damage was done. Same with the community of Arlington in Texas, where a single coyote terrorized the community. In the quiet hum of early February, Parkway Central Park in Arlington, Texas was a haven of weekend laughter and scattered sunshine. Families filled the open spaces, children darted between the slides and monkey bars, and the crisp air still hinted faintly of winter. But beneath that calm, something had shifted without anyone noticing. On Saturday, February 10th, the first scream cut through the afternoon like a jagged blade. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9, had been playing near the tree line when the coyote emerged from behind a thicket and lunged. Chaos followed. Parents ran. Shouts erupted. By the time someone reached her, the animal was gone, vanishing into the trees as silently as it had appeared. The girl clutched her arm, trembling, teeth marks etched red into her skin. That should have been the end of it. But Monday brought another child, another attack. this time near the walking path that skirted the pond. A second bite, more panic, another trip to the hospital. By then, rumors had begun to swirl. Children were told to stay close. Dog walkers turned back early. But on Tuesday, the unthinkable happened again. A third child, playing near the basketball courts, screamed as a coyote lunged out from the shadows and knocked him to the ground. This one was braver, or perhaps more desperate. Witnesses said it didn't flee immediately. It lingered, watching, even as adults raced toward it. Only then did it melt away, leaving behind torn clothing and a shaken boy. City officials had seen enough. That night they closed Parkway Central Park. What had once been Arlington's peaceful retreat was now silent. The gates were locked. Signs were posted. Park closed, wildlife risk. Do not enter. Patrols were dispatched. Traps were set. The fear was real, pressing down like a storm cloud that wouldn't break. On Thursday, February 15th, movement in the underbrush snapped the quiet. Arlington Animal Services, working with the USDA, had their target. The coyote appeared again, bold, aggressive, eyes reflecting the flashlight beams. As officers closed in, it charged. They had expected a chase. What they got instead was confrontation. It lunged at one of them, snarling and unrelenting. That was all the confirmation they needed. The animal was subdued and euthanized on the spot. Rabies was ruled out. The city sighed, relieved but wary. While the behavior aligned with the attacks, there was no way to be absolutely sure it was the same animal. Still, the pattern ended there. No more sightings, no more screams. In the days that followed, the investigation widened. USDA officers walked the length of the park, noting every detail. And there, near picnic benches and dumpsters, they found what they feared. Overflowing trash, loose food, open containers. A banquet for scavengers. The coyotes hadn't just wandered in. They'd been invited. City officials moved fast. New guidelines were posted. Trash bins were reinforced and regularly emptied. Residents were urged not to leave food outside, not even scraps. Wildlife, they warned, remembers generosity in the worst way. These creatures took it far in this next story, going after a child who was still breastfeeding. The late afternoon sun cast a golden shimmer across the Scottsdale sidewalks, the kind that softened shadows and painted everything in warm hues. It was March 22nd, 2023, a mild spring day. Kelly Perozzi stepped out of her car, with her toddler son Brody a few paces behind her. The driveway stretched from the curb to their pale stucco home like any other in the quiet neighborhood. Brody, just 21 months old, walked in that uneven way only toddlers do. And then it happened. From the edge of a neighbor's lawn, a gray blur darted out. A coyote, lean and fast. It closed the distance in seconds, jaws wide and eyes locked onto the smallest figure in its line of sight. Kelly didn't hear it approach. What she heard was the thud of Brody falling, followed by a sharp cry, shrill, pained, and utterly primal. She turned in time to see the coyote lunge and clamp its teeth onto Brody's right arm. His tiny body twisted under the force, legs flailing as he hit the driveway. Something in Kelly snapped. She sprinted forward, her scream echoing off the garage door as she grabbed Brody and yanked him up. The coyote, startled, backed away, teeth bared and eyes unreadable. It lingered for a second longer, long enough to imprint its face into her memory, before darting back into the mesquite-lined alley behind their home. Kelly slammed the front door shut behind her and rushed to the kitchen, cradling her sobbing son in one arm while fumbling for her phone with the other. Blood dotted the sleeve of his shirt. His arm had bite marks, red and shallow, but terrifying all the same. The attack had lasted no more than a few seconds, but it had changed everything. Only later, when she checked the footage from the Ring camera, would she see it all again in stark detail. Brody unsuspecting, the coyote's deliberate ambush, her scream and the dash inside. What she didn't know was that it wasn't the first. Just 4 days earlier, another child, also 21 months old, had been attacked by a coyote at Aztec Park, less than 2 miles away. It had been a sunny Saturday afternoon. The boy had been playing in the sand beneath the swings when a coyote crept out of the desert brush bordering the park and swiped at him. He too suffered minor injuries, and like Brody, was saved by the swift reaction of a parent. The Arizona Game and Fish Department responded immediately. Officers swept through the area, setting traps and tracking movements. Believing the same coyote was responsible, based on its boldness and the close proximity of the two attacks, they began an aggressive search. Over the next several days, 4 coyotes were captured and euthanized for rabies testing. All came back negative. One, however, told a different story. In its stomach were scraps of dog food, still whole, and evidence of something else. Muffins, bits of scrambled egg, even what looked like toast crusts. Someone had been feeding them. Officers canvassed the neighborhood and found what they feared: scattered piles of food left under trees and behind fences. To some, perhaps it seemed like kindness, but to the coyotes, it was an invitation to approach, to lose fear, to forget the line between wild and domestic.